So does there need to be a reset in the relationship between the press and politicians in this country? We obviously see in Westminster a lot of lobby journalism is partly about access. So what needs to change, if anything?
First of all, journalists need to be brave. They need to stand by their journalism. They need to not debase themselves trying to please politicians, and politicians need to remind themselves that broadcast television and radio journalists are absolutely key to our democracy, and they should not be undermining them. They can criticize them, they can call them to account, they can complain about them, but they should not be undermining the very existence both of public service broadcasters and also of our brilliant system of television regulation. Because in America, we have seen what happens when television journalists spout the lies of bad politicians. And what happened was that American democracy, something we all believed was so strong, in a matter of a few hours, suddenly seemed to be under attack. And those protesters had heard again and again television journalists say as facts ludicrous opinions of Donald Trump. In the recent court action, it was stated that on 20 occasions, Fox News journalists repeated statements of Donald Trump. And we know from the internal emails and texts that came out, as well as statements made, that the journalists knew that what Donald Trump was saying was untrue. And America is only over the water. So we shouldn't be complacent, because I bet Americans were complacent and thought nothing could shake their democracy. So politicians should be careful to criticize us and complain about us fairly, but to let us do our jobs. And I think it's also very important that politicians should not undermine the financial stability of our public service broadcasting sector. The threatened privatization of Channel 4 would have been disastrous for democratic debate in this country. But also the BBC is absolutely essential to our democracy. 74% of people who watch the BBC believe it's trustworthy. A fraction of that percentage believe politicians are trustworthy. And we need trust in journalism. It's really important that people should be able to turn on their televisions and believe what they hear. COVID showed us the great importance, particularly of the BBC. And if we undermine the BBC's financial stability too much, and it's having to make massive cuts, we're told that its license fee is to go, but there isn't yet a viable alternative, we will find potentially that the BBC doesn't have enough money to put out that accurate, trusted journalism that 76% of people in this country use regularly every year.
And Just one other thing, actually, while you were talking, that I wanted to ask you about, and now time's slightly against us, is what do you make of the growing trend of politicians presenting news in inverted commas programmes on Talk TV, on GB News? There's an increasing number of politicians who are, in a sense, acting as journalists.
Well, lots of politicians used to be journalists, so I can't object to politicians turning into journalists. I think probably the British people would like to hear from a wider group of people. I think it depends whether they're any good at it. And it depends whether they spout their own political views while presenting news and make out that they are being duly impartial. But we need to be clear, there is a great deal of difference between Krishnan Guru Murthy or Hugh Edwards telling you what's happening in the world. They are duty bound to be politically duly impartial. I think if Nadine Dorris is presenting a programme, you would probably be foolish to rely on it being duly impartial, but it might be entertaining. It might be interesting. She might give you perspectives that you have never heard anywhere before. And let's be frank, Nadine Dorris often has said to us very surprising things. I would much rather see Nadine Dorris presenting a programme on Talk TV than see her as Culture Secretary. As Culture Secretary, she was a disaster, partly because she was so ignorant of culture. So I'm very happy to see her on Talk TV. And in fact, I think quite a number of us could think of some other politicians we would like to see shuffled off to Talk TV.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.